Welcome to the Modern Husbands Podcast, where every other week we host national thought leaders to discuss how spouses can partner to manage money and the home together to live happier lives. Today's topic is money, men, and mental wellness, and we welcome in Lawrence Sprung. Lawrence is a certified financial planner and president of Mitlin Financial. He was named a top 100 advisor by Investopedia in 2021 and 2022. He serves on the national board of the American Federation for Suicide Prevention and sits on its financial and investment committees. With his wife, Denise, he has raised more than $1.5 million for the organization through the Keith Milano Memorial Fund. Welcome, Lawrence.
Welcome, Lawrence.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Good to have you.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Bruce. Appreciate it.
Well, we're gonna start by flipping the script here on you. You have an incredible podcast, and you focus on asking podcast guests and this theme of what brings you joy. So I want to start with you. What did you do today that brought you joy?
All right. Well, you're going to have to pay me a royalty for that because it is trademarked, but I'll let you go. I'll let you go this time. But yes, my show, the Mitlin Money Mindset, we're all about joy. And we end every show by asking each of our guests that same very question that you've now posed to me. And, I did two things today that brought me joy. One was physical and one was probably mental, I guess. You would say the physical was riding my Peloton. I, enjoy getting 30 to 45 minutes, just riding, get the heart going and racing and getting a good sweat up. And then the second piece was when I get to the office, the first thing I do before I do anything else is I always write at least one thing that I am grateful for. And, that is something that, gives me a lot of joy, and both those things combined in my view, and for me is a great way to start the day. So that's how I usually start it.
Do you start every day with exercise?
No, most of the days I end with exercise,
Okay.
just the way that I'm kind of hardwired. I enjoy getting up, getting out and get going. And then I typically, my kids are 16 and 19. Neither one of them live at home currently. One's in college and one's in prep school. So I have no kids at home. So I get home, I put in a little exercise, and then have dinner with my wife afterwards. So that's kind of my routine.
I love the strategy of writing down what you're grateful for, one thing each day. Do you have a board that you write it on so you see it? Do you write it somewhere on your desk? Where do you put it?
So now I've gone paperless as of about a couple of months ago, like completely paperless. And I use a Remarkable, and I have a daily, like a daily planner. And in one of the pieces of the planner every day, I write something that I'm grateful for within that. And then usually at the end of the week, I kind of go back to see what I wrote during the week, just to kind of recap it. And then even then at the end of the month and the end of the quarter, kind of take a look at what happened over the course of the month and the quarter.
I think that's awesome. There's two things in that one, writing it down makes it concrete, right? It makes it much more real than just kind of having these like thoughts that might not be totally succinct or together yet. But then I love that reflection piece. And it's not just at the end of the day. You say like you're doing at the end of the week, maybe at the end of the month, maybe even at the end of the year, kind of going back through these.
Yeah, I love doing it, and it's definitely helpful. And some days I write more than one, but I try to only get at least one thing written down on a day-to-day basis.
So talking about your podcast here, we're just getting started here, but you've been doing this a little bit longer than us. How many podcasts have you hosted, do you think? And I guess kind of a follow-up to that, based on what you have learned running that podcast, supporting your clients, what drives joy for most men?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. So I'll do my best. And if I miss a piece, feel free to keep me on a hook and bring me back to it. But so our podcast, we just released about a week or two ago, our 100th episode that went live.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I was grateful to have Ron Carson, the founder and CEO of Carson Group, who we're a part of. We're a partner firm to them as our guests. So it was awesome. And as a kind of special treat, we normally just do the audio. We actually did the video for that one as well. And then I probably have about another 25 shows that are already in the can. So, I've hosted 125 plus episodes. Obviously 100, 101 or 102 have gone live. So there's 20 to 25 more in the can that are ready to be released and are on the calendar. So I am a planner through and through. I don't like being under the gun for a last minute show. So I kind of keep them in and ready to go. So we have those available. And, I really enjoy it. I hear a lot of folks ask me, what's the ROI on the show? What's the return on investment? And I have an idea of what we've gotten in terms of a return on investment, but I will tell you this, guys, if the return on investment was zero and I didn't generate an ounce or an iota of business from the podcast, I would still do it. Yeah, 100%. Because for me, I enjoy it. I get a lot of joy out of just doing the podcast. I get to talk to a lot of great people. I've met a lot of great people. We have had some success in getting some return on investment, but that's the last thing I focus on. I just like having great conversations with people I find interesting, and I enjoy it thoroughly. So that's something that, that I love. And what we try to do is go deep with engaging guests that I feel people that know me, whether it be me personally, we have a lot of hockey people on, whether it be entrepreneurs who know me as a business person and are interested in diving deep into, on people's entrepreneurial journeys, or lastly, on the mental health front. It's something that's very important to me and in my life. And, we've been big promoters of it, talking about it. And we pretty much put our guests in those three categories. So I try to kind of, lead conversations that are going to be helpful to others through those three kind of main channels, if you will.
Let's dive into like the mental health front, because as we've transitioned from the pre-COVID world to the post-COVID world, where there's more folks working remotely, more folks that are interacting less frequently in person with coworkers. And as we've also seen a shift of a traditional 1950 household where the male is the breadwinner and the wife stays home, to something that reflects the career world where 38% of households now have breadwinners led by women, or the majority of American households are dual income. And most of us are, I'm in that boat, right? We both have a job. That brings about a tremendous amount of stress. When you have had these conversations with mental health professionals, what have you found to be some of the key triggers to men struggling, and how have they worked through some of those problems?
Again, I want to say in full disclosure, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical practitioner. I'm not a therapist even. I don't have any of those degrees. So anything that I'm talking about with you gentlemen today is really from my own personal circumstances, my own personal education, and my own personal conversations with folks. And I would say to that question is, there's always stresses in life. Even if you go back 40 years, the stresses were a little bit different. I don't think they were the same as today, but I still feel that there was stress there. And the only difference between me or somebody else that struggles and has issues in that regard is really the way my brain processes it, and may process it different than that other individual, and my outlook, my mindset, etc. So there are a lot of those things at work. What I've been told is there are certain things that people should be doing in order to reduce that level of stress and kind of work on their mindset. And I think that there are two different kind of questions underlying in what you're saying. I think first question is, how do you take care of yourself from a mental health standpoint? And then I think secondarily, the second question is if you are a male in a situation where, you know, your wife is the breadwinner, because you're saying that's happening in 38% of the situation, you know, that might be a different methodology to kind of approach that, right? Because the traditional things, I think the things that will help you with stress will also help you with that, but there also may need to be a little bit of a mindset shift there as well. But in terms of that, I think, you know, exercise is very important. Diet is very important. Being grateful, you know, having a gratitude journal can be very helpful. You know, there are a lot of things, meditation, which I've tried and continue to try again. I'll see if I can make it work, but you know, I haven't been able to kind of get into that groove yet. But I mean, there are very simple things that can be done on a regular basis that will help you reduce that stress level and maybe allow you to deal with it a little bit differently. And I don't think anything's really outside the box. I think a lot of times people try it. They, you know, maybe try it 2-3 times, it doesn't work, and then they move on. And it's really something that you have to get into a habit of doing it for 30, 60, 90, 180 days, and then really see how it works, you know. And I think all these methods that I kind of, you know, spoke about, you know, it doesn't replace medication per se. There are people that need medication regardless, but if you're on that borderline, you know, medication is going to take a while to work into your system. So why not try a different way if you're in a position and can do that, and it makes sense, and your doctor says it's worth your while to try it? Why not try those methods first? And then in terms of, you know, the male female dynamic that you mentioned earlier, you know, listen, there are certain situations that it's just not going to work, right? If you're fundamentally, you believe that your spouse, if your spouse is a woman, can't be the breadwinner, and, you know, there may not be an availability to change that mindset shift. You know, in terms of you being open to it, you know, listen, I was always of the ilk with my wife, you know, 2 young boys. It was like, you know, there were times where her business and her career outshined mine. And there are times where, you know, through our marriage, that mine has outshone hers. And we've always kind of taken the mindset that it really didn't matter who was doing it. Let's just do it together, you know?
Right.
And the great thing about us and what worked for us was, you know, when I was starting to build my practice and we were just getting started out, her business was doing very well. So she has afforded me the availability and the ability to be where I am today. And, you know, that's a mindset shift. I don't see the issue with it. So it's even hard for me to understand why somebody would. You know, I don't think that we should be attaching ourselves to our careers and our profession and our, you know, and our self-worth should be there. You know, I just said to somebody the other day on my show, I asked them, can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you are today? And she thought that was a great question, because she's like, you didn't ask me what I do for a living and explain to me what I do in the working world, because so many of us try to identify or have a tendency to identify ourselves and our worth with our work. And we're, as humans, we're so much more than that.
That's not our identity.
Yeah. It's just part of us, you know. You know, we talk about, you know, I'm not allowed, we talk about, you know, people talk about work-life balance. I think that that's garbage. I don't think there should be such thing as work-life balance. It should be work-life harmony. Everything should be getting along together. It shouldn't be one or the other. You know, work-life balance gives you the impression that one has to give and one has to take. And I don't think it should be that. I think everything should work in harmony together, and we'd be, you know, much better, less stressful, and in a much better place, I think, mentally throughout the world.
That is a terrific answer. I love that your approach. I love the fact that your answer, by the way, of you and your wife taking turns on who the breadwinner is, and that the idea of that you're just supporting one another. We continue to find that to be, you know, the majority of couples that we've had conversations with. But I want to turn to what you do during the day. I don't know where you find the hours to manage a podcast and manage a company, but in your time in working with clients, how do you advise them to tie together joy and happiness into their financial management decisions, into their financial plan? What's your strategy there?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that everything that stems from a financial plan, I think in our profession, a lot of advisors tie everything back to the investments, the dollars and the cents. And I think that that is a grave mistake, in my opinion. I think, the way we kind of view here, things here as an organization. And the reason why I can do all the things you mentioned is I have a great team behind me. Unbelievable. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to be here talking to you now. But so that's super helpful. But in terms of the planning, the investments and the dollars and cents, that's just really a vehicle for them to do what they really want to do in life. That's all it really is. So it's really about us working with the families we serve to understand what financial freedom means to them. And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And it changes over time. And figuring out what those things are that, in their minds, going to give them that financial freedom. What do they need to see? What do they need to be doing? What do they need to be, able to do? What are their goals and objectives? And then structuring everything around those things. It's almost like Simon Sinek's why, figure out that why and then put everything around it. And that's what we try to do. We then build the plan. We build their portfolio around that. And, listen, we cannot control what goes on in the markets. They're going to go up and down, however they go based upon market events, economy, et cetera. Our goal there is to create this plan that's going to be time tested. And you know what? It may have some challenges during times like this, but ultimately in the long run, they're going to be continually working towards finding their financial freedom, which, is the important piece. And I think the other important thing is when you're working with couples, that you're not taking direction and having the conversation with one half of the couple. You have to have the same conversation in the same meaningful way with both spouses. And it doesn't matter, if the wife takes the lead on the financials of the house or the husband takes the lead. Whoever is the lead taker needs to be involved in those conversations and those decisions as much as the person who's taking the lead. So I think that's the last piece to the puzzle is they both have to have a common interest. They both have to have a common, involvement in the process, because otherwise you're just building towards one of their financial freedoms and not really them collectively as a couple, which I think in the short run might work out okay. In the long run, I'm fairly confident it's going to be a big mistake and it's going to fall apart at some point.
So Lawrence, you've talked a lot about mental health and stress and what kind of drives joy. And we know you and your wife have raised about 1.5 million. Congratulations on that, to go towards suicide prevention efforts. Can you tell us a little bit more about the efforts for that fundraising and kind of what drives that passion?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with the end first. And I mean, the passion comes from, we lost my wife's brother, Keith Milano, to suicide in September of 2004. So we're just past the 18th anniversary of his passing. And, one of the things that we made a commitment to him for too, when he passed, was we weren't going to let him go quietly, and we were going to raise awareness and help others. And over the course of the 18 years, that $1.5 million, I will tell you, plus, we would not have been able to do it on our own. It was a tremendous community that helped us raise that money. Some of it was our own personal funds that we have donated. But the vast majority of the monies that have been raised really come from two areas. One was a golf outing that we ran for about 10 years that was spearheaded by myself and my brother-in-law's company that he worked for prior to his passing. And that had kind of run its course after about 10 years. And now it's been taken on by romance authors, romance book authors. They approached my wife several years ago about donating a portion of the proceeds, one author in particular, for her book that she was releasing in May for Mental Health Awareness Month. And long story short, that snowballed. We've raised about $30,000 in 2022, maybe 40,000, and had about 35, 40 authors that took part in that. And then we also have a lot of people that just donate from time to time because they know what we're doing and what we're about. So we're very grateful for the community that we've kind of tapped into that has helped us facilitate and raise that kind of money. I will tell you what doesn't go in the bio, though, that is more important to my wife and I than the money, is we know for a fact, because we've become these de facto resources for people if they're struggling or have a family member that's struggling, they come to us to help them help their loved one or help them help themselves. We know for a fact that we have saved lives as a result. And that, forget about the money, that's much more important to us than any amount of money that we could raise. One of the things I would say, personal story, I was sitting on the couch about 4 or 5 weeks ago, got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't pick it up. And my 19-year-old was like, Dad, you got to pick it up. And it didn't say spam. So I picked it up, and it was a friend of mine's wife who lives in Florida. Her friend who lives on Long Island, where I am, was putting some very concerning remarks on Facebook about her mental health and possibly, harming herself. And she was very concerned, needed to know where to go. So we sent her some resources. Long story short is they got her somebody there to help her out. She went to some counseling and went to inpatient therapy. She's alive today. Maybe that doesn't happen had we not, gotten that call and I didn't I picked it up. So those are things, the money is great and we appreciate everybody.
Put a value on that.
Can't put a value on that. And that far exceeds any dollar amount that we would ever raise. Knowing that and knowing the others that we have saved along the way is we're very grateful for that.
We would like to help. Do you have a donation link we can share on our website when we post this podcast?
Yeah, if you go to keithmilano.org, it's just the way it's spelled, and Milano like the cookie. There's a donate now button right there, and anytime anybody donates there, we also get a report so we can thank them appropriately as well.
We'll be sure to include that link.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Have you, in meeting with your clients, have you seen kind of a pattern of men who connect their own self-worth with their financial net worth? And if so, how do you manage that? Because I'm assuming that could be a problem in some marriages.
Yeah, I mean, I think that ultimately that's always a concern. We haven't seen very much of that puts us on a concern level, but there are certainly, I think, I think now, in 2022, it's becoming a little bit less of an issue than maybe it was, 10, 15 years ago, for sure.
That's good.
We haven't seen many instances where, we're concerned that that's their ultimate goal, that it's a status or, some type of self-worth situation. There are some certain situations that, I believe people, they hit rough patches just like anybody does, right? And we have one family in particular that I could think of where the husband's been out of work for a very long time, and financially they're not in as good a shape as they were. And he's having, some struggles. And, he reached out to us and we put him in touch with some people to hopefully assist and help him through that. But I think much of that is situational. We haven't seen any of the families that we work with that say, hey, I need to have this net worth because this is what I need and this is where I want to be. And even if they do, we try to drill down into, okay, if you want that, what is that going to ultimately mean? Because if it's just money sitting in a bank, so you could say, print out an ATM statement and show that on the receipt, I don't know that that's a great reason to do it. So we try to dig deeper into the underlying reasons as to why they feel that they need that, amount of wealth. And usually it's tied to something that they've experienced when they were a kid, not having money, running out of money, or, mom or dad being put into a long-term care facility, running up big bills and putting the family in debt. Usually it's tied to something else. And the status thing is the perceived, hey, this is why I need it. And in reality, it's really some fear of something else going in their life that they're really saying they need that money for. At least that's been our experience.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lawrence. We do like to end our show typically with a simple idea to make our listeners smarter on the topic we've discussed today. So with that in mind, what's one thing you want our listeners to remember from today's episode?
Yeah, I think, listen, if you want to have good mental health, you got to take care of yourself. And what we talk about here is we talk about the three-legged stool. And if you take any one of those legs out, it's stressful and it's problematic. And you have to make sure that you're watching out for your physical health, your financial health, and your mental health. Those are the three things, and they're very interconnected and intertwined, and you have to feed them all equally. And I would just tie this back to, the significant other and the spouse. You have to be on the same page, because if you're not on the same page, that's going to affect at least one, if not multiple of those legs on the stool. So it's important that you get on the same page, even if it's just having an understanding of what the other person's going through, what their ideas are. But you have to have some cohesiveness to make that all work and the stool stand the test of time for you and your family.
Thank you so much for coming in today. It has been enlightening.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Christian, Dr. Ross, and I thank our listeners and our guest. Please be sure to go to modernhusbands.com, where you can subscribe to our podcast. You can listen to our podcast in whatever platform you prefer: Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or even on YouTube. Until next time, be well.